I bought the mic out. Hey guys, welcome back to another Limitless Conversation Stripped. This one's a little less stripped, a little more dressed, but still raw and still real. And literally, there's no glitz and glamour, baby. I am wearing an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants today. I didn't set up my lights and I didn't set up the camera. This is my iPhone. Okay, so if you wonder if you can start a podcast with your iPhone, you can. But I did pull out the mic because I want this message to be crystal clear. No, I'm joking. I just wanted better audio. These trips will be continued in the car and wherever the heck. But today I just happen to be home and I got time today. So I want to talk a little bit today about this questions that have been coming up for me, to be totally honest. If I'm just being transparent, like the other day I have been listening to a lot of Christian content lately. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to get saved. And I'm like, dang, that's gonna go against like everything I've ever been, which is okay. The thing about me is I'm really mutable in certain spaces of my life. I really don't, and this is why I talk about all the time, like how I'm open to a lot of stuff. Like I'm open to different religions, I'm open to different belief systems, I'm open to how people navigate because from just what I have gotten to explore of different religions is they all kind of come to the same core of being a good person, being of service to other people, operating from abundance and how God is just an overflowing vessel and energy. There's always a good and a bad, and there's just kind of always just a lot of the same core sentiments. So I'm really big on the message and not the messenger. Like, sure, this might be coming from a preacher, but I could still enjoy it. And I think diversity is really important for me. But anyway, having like been listening to so much Christian stuff lately, I've just been hearing a lot of really people who are really, really convicted and what do they call them? Not righteous. Not righteous. What's the word there? When they're just really strong in their convictions to God and Jesus. And I've listened to a lot of their content lately. And at the core, I do love some of the things that they say. And what's tricky though for me is like I don't always I don't always enjoy what feels like judgment from them of being like, well, I used to do crystals and I used to do tarot and I used to do sage. And of course I recognize that some of it I took personally in the beginning because of the fact that I used to use that kind of stuff. But being someone who even gravitated away from that kind of stuff, I still think that they're beautiful tools. I just think that I don't personally use them anymore, and so I just always found that they kind of condemn certain things. And so that was also something that kinda drew me away from it for sure, and also just some things didn't necessarily make sense to me, but anyway, I was just listening to a few different people, and they all were talking about, like, "Oh, I astral projected, and that was so bad, and that was the devil, and that wasn't good," and then, it caused all these questions for me, especially being in this season that we're in, like, just the energy of the world right now. Being in this season, it calls questions for me, like, well, are these bad things that I'm doing? Should I have not been exploring these things? Is it causing me more stress? The fact that I have so much knowledge and so much information, because I've done spiritual things and, I've had visions and I've astral projected and I don't know. Can I say that? I don't know. I've had visions and I've had dreams and I've had spiritual inklings and, I have conversations with God and, I do these things that are spiritual. I used to read tarot and all these things. And I'm like, am I tapping into the darkness of life? Like just hearing all these Christians, no shade to them or nothing like that. Cause I think that they have a purpose. I think everything is within balance. You know what I mean? I appreciate people who are strong for God because in that moment when I started listening to a lot of Christian content, I was not feeling the strongest. And that content really encouraged me to keep purifying myself, to keep submitting myself to the higher light and the higher purpose. And so I do appreciate the content, but so much of it did make me start to question and judge myself. Like, am I not supposed to be being this spiritual? Is having all of this information and wisdom a bad thing? And then, like, would my life be easier if I didn't know this stuff? Like, if I didn't know that you attract certain things as a mirror, if I didn't know that there were like other energies that you could tap into and that are at play, or if I didn't like astral project and see different beings in my house, like if I wasn't aware of all of the of like things like shame and guilt, like if I wasn't aware of that stuff, like would life be easier? And I was looking at people who were Christian, like, oh, they just, the content that I had been seeing, they're so strong for God. They just love God so much. And they just seem like everything is so, so peaceful. And I'm like, well, maybe I should just be Christian and everything will be peaceful for me. And so I really was asking these questions to Source and to God. And I'm just like, this is how I'm feeling, God. Like, I'm feeling like this feels like the easier route. And then, of course, I was reminded of different things, but I was reminded that there's good and bad no matter what you choose. This is part of life. And then for some reason, the story of Adam and Eve just kept coming to me. I don't know if it was in some of the content I was watching. I don't know if it was my own personal reflection. I think it was a combination of the both. But something about the story of Adam and Eve just kept coming to me. And I'm like, okay, there's some tie to Adam and Eve and the questions that I'm having about exploring the darkness and understanding all of the dualities of life, truly. Like, but of course, I was just more focusing on the negative things because I was good with the good. It was just the bad that I'm like, I don't want that, I don't want that. I don't want to know about dark beings. I don't want to know about all that kind of stuff. I don't know about that kind of stuff. So, would my life be easier if I didn't know about that kind of stuff? And so I just kept feeling this draw to the story of Adam and Eve. And so I'm like, all right, let me find the story, right? And so I read the story this morning, and I talked to God about it, and I really just want to tell you what I what I wrote, um, because, and then if I wanted to elaborate, then I will. But I mean, I wrote it beautifully when I wrote it, so I'm just gonna share what I wrote. So I said, because these people that were Christian, they were talking about how they were Christian and they did all these different things and they found their way back to going to be back being Christian. And I'm like, oh, is that the next natural step? Like, am I supposed to like express all these things and then go back to being Christian? Like, is that what's supposed to happen? Like they condemn the new age. And I've always felt weird about that because it's like, well, the world's evolving. So, well, we're supposed to evolve and belief systems are supposed to evolve. Why do we believe that that shouldn't expand, you know, that it shouldn't grow outward? These are just more questions that are coming up as I make my way back. And so, to my truth, not yours, you do you. I think Christianity is beautiful for people. Like, yeah, I think it's great for people who it works for. I just think that everyone has a different path. You know what I mean? And it's just, I just hate the idea of thinking that, like, one is better than the other or whatever. And even I get tripped up in the ego trip of feeling like what I believe is better. I'm human. The fuck? I won't act like I'm not. But I'm just saying, the enlightenment that God has been giving me is to just not be in judgment of anything and to honor that everyone finds their own way. Everyone has their own path. Everyone's brain is wired differently. Like, some people think more scientifically, some people think more philosophical, some people think more street smarts, but some people think more based on body and gym and health. And that's their catalyst to how they see things. I mean, everyone just sees things so differently. So none of it's wrong. So I just was making my way back to what my truth was and what my path is. And so, so I recalled the story of Adam and Eve and how God told them, don't eat from the tree of knowledge, that they would go to hell if they did. And it made me ask, and it made me want to understand the inner workings um, that made, oh, okay, no. Is it better to have a level of oblivion? Is it dark to understand so much? So then that was kind of my question. So I just read what I believe to be the story of Adam and Eve. Essentially, God told them, eat from the tree of life and not of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God said it will make them wise and like God. There was all this punishment involved. Women will have painful birth. The serpent will crawl on his stomach. And Adam, I didn't truly get what his punishment was. But then I wondered, why was the serpent allowed there? If you were God, why allow the temptation? Clearly, the good and bad already existed because you have the serpent who was the conniving, and then you had God who created. So clearly, the good and bad already existed. God just told them not to. But God also allowed temptation. Why? And had Adam and Eve had more knowledge on the effects of the good and the bad, would they have made the same decision? They were in bliss before, just living, and they ate. And once they ate the fruit, they felt shame or negative emotion, because they talked about them being naked and being like, oh my God, we're naked. All right. But the tree had the knowledge of good and bad. Would Adam and Eve be able to experience good if they did not know bad? Seems like a package deal. Before they seem to be existing but not living. The fact is that, oh, I don't want to say that part, but I think we would like to think that it would just be easier to live in oblivion. But the fact is that we don't. If we like were to believe the story of Adam and Eve, right? If we were to believe this story, and then we all came from Adam and Eve, right? Then the knowledge that they would have attained would be in our DNA, right? They if That's how I believe. I believe in the science of things being passed down genetically through us, right? So if Adam and Eve have the tree of knowledge, that means that we're all birthed with the tree of knowledge, with the good and the bad. We all know this. And so is the idea that we would rather just operate in oblivion and not know the good and the bad? And then something we learn in therapy and counseling, I remember hearing Brene Brown talk about it, to numb one side of the spectrum is to numb all sides of the spectrum. So the tree of knowledge housed the good and the bad. It didn't just say the bad. So then I'm wondering, like, well, would we even know what it would be like to have good experiences if we didn't know what it was like to have the other end of the bad? It was a package deal from that story, and it just made me have so many questions about that. And inevitably, this is what Earth is about. Like, Earth is this story. Earth is the story of duality. Like, there are realms from my belief system that do not exist in the realms of good and bad. That's not a thing, right? But we come down on earth to feel, to experience feelings, to experience shame, guilt. That's literally what this is about here. And so it just dug me further into clarity about, like, well, then maybe it would be more bliss if I was just Christian and I wouldn't think about these things. And it's like, well, no, they're not exempt from good and bad. They still participate in it. Maybe their level of knowledge or understanding, depending on them, because there's obviously different levels, but maybe their level that they explore all of it is different. But the levels for me, if I explore the darkness or the bad or whatever, and I don't, this is not meaning like doing negative practices or things like that. This really just means like understanding that there is darkness that exists here. Like, I'm not pretending that it doesn't exist. I know that it exists. I decide not to participate in it, but I'm fully aware that it's here, and I'm fully aware that it has a place here. Because, well, how would you know good? Like, Adam and Eve beforehand, they were just operating. There wasn't anything about anything that they felt before, right? Didn't say that they felt good about eating from the tree of life or life was amazing or stuff like that from the story I read or what I really picked up from it. They were just going through motions. It almost felt lifeless. And it's like, well, then they ate from this tree and now they did experience shame of like, oh my God, I'm naked. But also it meant that they were probably going to experience good too. Like, you know what I mean? So when I just sat and broke down that story, it was helpful for me because I had been feeling so condemned for having explored and understood like all the veils of earth, or not all of the veils because there's so many things I haven't done, but just understanding more of the veils of earth and feeling so bad about that, but being like, well, the deeper, even if I explore, the hard emotions of shame and guilt, like they felt shame, oh my God, I'm naked, don't see me, if even if I didn't explore those feelings, how I have to consider how good the good feels. You know what I mean? It just happened to catch me in a moment where it called me on the right day, because it called me on a day, let's not say a day because the whole day wasn't that way, but it caught me in a moment where I was feeling lackful. So I was just seeing all of the bad about knowing the bad things about life. Like, oh man, I attracted that to me. Or, oh man, I feel like I got to make people happy. Oh man, I'm feeling shame around this. Oh man. So because I was in that lackful energy, then I was like, well, I shouldn't have even known this stuff. I don't even want to know this stuff. And then I'm extremely grateful to have been brought back to this story because it reminds me that life is about duality, that we do get to experience both ends of the spectrum. And if I wanted to never experience the bad or whatever, then I wouldn't know what it would be like for things to be good. Like life is contrast. And then bad is so relative because if I can challenge myself to not see that, you know how we've been reframing our mind, just collectively, I've heard a lot, not losing its lessons, so you would think that those things are bad before, but what if they're just expansion moments? They're just lessons, right? So, yeah, that was my thought today. I was just very curious about this story of Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. And yeah. So again, not again, I don't think I've said it yet. My point is never to change anyone's perspective. I feel like do you fully, please. I'm only just sharing my thoughts that I have on things, like things that just come up for me and just my journey, because I think it's cool to hear other people's journeys. But know that I'm not, I don't want to be, baby, I don't want to be convinced and I don't want to convince you. I want everyone to do what feels good for them. Um, I watch people on their Christian journey and I love it for them. Truly, I swear on everything. I'm being so sincere in my heart. I love it for them because it's the path that's bringing them the most peace and it's the path that works the best for them. And I love everyone taking the journey that they take because everyone chooses what works best for them and based on what they're supposed to do. You know what I mean? I think that there's people we're all here on earth collectively trying to help the earth elevate. And we're all going to collectively have different roles to play. So there may be people who are more spiritual, who are into astrals, who are going in and fighting darkness and putting different things in place. And then there are going to be people who are in prayer and who are praying to God, who are praying to the energy of God. Even those have been questions from me of like, well, God, what is this? Like when we pray, well, what do I believe that is? These are things that I define, but just coming back to remember them because, like I said, I just had this energy that we're in the world is just a place that's causing so many questions and making me ask so many questions. And like I said, the last video, if it goes up first, might go up second now, I don't know. But it's really an opportunity when you ask questions to either dig in deeper to get more rooted in what you believe or to decide that you don't like it and to leave. And that's really the only two things that could happen. So, yeah. Well, that's this episode of Limitless Conversation Stripped. It just was really fascinating. I had never really dived into these stories. And yeah. I did think that it was interesting that God didn't want us to have the wisdom that he has. I found that interesting. And then I recall um hearing hearing many Christians that I have come across, you know, that's not really important, I guess. I just found that interesting. I did just find that interesting that it was like they're too much like God now. They know too much and they should be punished for that. And then they talked about having wisdom and a punishment for having wisdom. And I thought it was interesting. So yeah, that's it. Well, I love you guys much. And if you agree or don't, well, even if you agree or don't agree, either way, it brings you closer to your truth. And this was just a conversation of exploration today. I love these strip things because I talk about like this is truly like limitless conversations. I love it because I'm talking about everything. I come on, I talk about what I'm emotionally feeling because I have so many feelings. Like I feel things emotionally, I feel things spiritually. So I feel things on a very human, practical level, and then I go airy fairy up to the spirit world, and I'm like, oh, none of it even matters. It's all for a bigger picture. And then I'd be like, but I'm so sad. So it's just kind of cool to like explore like that. Today, I was just exploring something about religion, and we're having a conversation about a story about Adam and Eve, and then later, I might be just talking about anything. So yeah, love y'all.